Hey Fitheads, today we have Harpreet Rai, and he's the CEO of Oura. We talk about the perfect thing to do for health for everyone universally. Just kidding. It's the whole thing is about individualized health and wellness and figuring out for yourself. It's really cool.
Yeah, the Oura Ring is. I think it's nice because it first and foremost is a sleep tracker, and so that says a couple of things. One, sleep is really really important. Two, we're tracking it as much as we can, and that's something like we should really focus on. And three, now that they're doing other stuff, they're still sort of sticking to the root of like we're focusing on sleep and how to improve stuff. But what I loved when he was talking about like sharing the data, data, data.
One's plural? I don't know.
Being able to see sort of health data from like a billion people, or not, a ton of people that we hadn't really been able to share before, and how that could like maybe predict some things like when you're going to get sick or how
Mhm.
you're going to feel, this, that, or the other thing. That was my favorite part of it, like the pooling of information,
Yeah.
so that we can all sort of do better. That was really cool.
The future is here and it's on my finger.
Welcome to Total Fitheads.
Serious fitness for not so serious people.
Welcome, Harpreet. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Allie. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's obviously gonna flex right now. This was not set up for the podcast. Anybody who's just listening, I'm showing off my ring that is always on. I'm guessing you have every finger covered.
Um, it's funny. I got like 3 on,
You really
but
do.
some of our people who do testing on our team literally like wear like more than 10, right? Because like when you're making hardware, you just want to test a lot of things, right? You want to
Yeah.
generate data and crash reports and stuff like that. So some of the people on our team literally will have like more than 2 rings on each finger. It's pretty cool. Uh, so yeah, I don't know if they do that at like, like Garmin or Fitbit or Apple. Like I just imagine not, because it's like your sleeve would be, instead of tatted, just like a lot of watches. But I guess this is more manageable when you have 10 fingers.
Or Ray Bans that just have like 30 sunglasses.
Yeah, well, when you say more manageable, that's leading to the perfect question. Is like what was the choice to go ring versus wrist or ankle?
Yeah. So I would say there's 2 main reasons we went with that, and it was primarily both accuracy and convenience. I'll actually start with sort of the convenient spot first, right? Like, we measure a lot of data, all throughout the day, but even more data when you sleep. And I think, we felt like starting with sleep in this space where so many other wearables were just sort of focused on tracking your activity, first with chest straps, like just track your heart rate just when you're working out, or just track your steps when you're walking. Well, it turns out like, the human body is really complex and so, how you sleep and how you recover is actually probably the biggest determinant on how you're going to perform today. Right. And so I think if you take a step back and look at the science of sleep, right, like all your muscle repair happens in your sleep, right? All of sort of your learning, right, whether it's your physical ability to learn new motions, like taking free throw shots, right, in a special way, or learning, a special, let's say, how to do a thrust for the first time in a gym, right? All that memory consolidation, or even if you're reading a book, for example, happens in your REM sleep, and so it turns out like how we sleep and recover is actually how we're going to perform the next day. And most wearables, when we started, just weren't tracking sleep. Fitbit wasn't doing it. Apple still doesn't really do it. Garmin wasn't doing it. Jawbone, started doing it, but then unfortunately went out of business. And so I think we just felt like there was a wide open space in sleep, and so many people didn't understand the impact that it had to your health. And so when you think about the convenience, you don't want to wear a chest strap when you sleep, right? People take things off. You don't want to even wear something on your wrist, right? It's like, you're cuddling with your loved one or your dog. You don't want to, catch them on the side of your plastic part of your Fitbit, or keep them awake with those blinking lights. So I think, we really wanted to focus on something that's easy to use, that's convenient. And, really part of the reason we made the rings titanium. It's so light that you forget it's even there, lighter than a regular ring. So I think that convenience is really important to getting users to change a behavior and use something. And then accuracy, your pulse signal on your fingers, it's reason why every hospital measures it, right? Both your heart rate and your SpO2 there. It turns out that that actual pulse signal comes from your arteries on the inside of your wrist into the palm of your hand. And frankly, that pulse itself is about 100 times stronger there, the signal to detect than on your wrist where your veins are, where your watch sits. And it's that pulse signal strength that allows us to see a better signal in the noise. We use way less power and we can sample way more frequently than other wearables. And I think that's allowed us to do sleep staging more accurately, heart rate variability more accurately. Even some of our data now with UCSF and COVID, and even women's health. We had a pretty big paper hit at the end of last year that sort of showed we can see luteinizing hormone, with over 90% accuracy. The surge of LH for women in their ovulatory cycle. And so I think that really deep data is in accuracy and combined with an easy to use form factor is really the reasons we chose the Ring.
It's super convincing. I never thought about the fact about that even the hospital uses your finger.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because I was thinking that strap was the height of the accuracy, right? You're always
no, it's probably one of the worst places. Actually, I think like your ears are better. Obviously, your chest is better. Even your toes are better. Right. The reason it sort of happened is because of how the whole step tracking. So look at wearables, right? First, the step tracking was like on a pedometer belt clip. No one wanted to wear that. Right. And then Fitbit came along and they're like, hey, let's put that sensor in a digital wristwatch. And why do they choose that? Well, let me see. How many watches are sold every year? Like 500 million watches are sold every year or more. How many of those are under $200 and are digital? Actually, most of them. And so put a little tiny sensor in there that tracks your steps and boom, sort of a smart, a smart watch. So not just a watch. And so I think they started with steps, and then the heart rate sensors came along later, all the technology for that. After sort of step tracking came along, and then it turns out, well, they already have market share. Let's use that form factor, just throw it in there, even though it's not as accurate. So I think it's just an evolution in the space and the way this health sensing technology has evolved.
Can you walk us through everything that the Ring tracks? Because
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting. I think it's sort of the wearables and the bios, all this stuff it's sort of a two-pronged thing. And the first thing is always, what are we tracking?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I sort of refer to it as
also mention the secret stuff you're tracking, by the way, that we don't
Yes,
know.
that'd be great.
we track all your web browser activity. No, we don't, obviously, but we don't even have GPS in there. So I think that's another thing that frankly has helped us as data privacy becomes a bigger and bigger issue. So yeah, Max, I talk about two problems in the wearable space. Like, is it accurate? And then like, what do I do with it?
Right. That was
but
the
I
second
think,
thing I was
yeah,
gonna say.
it's like what every consumer asks, man.
What is it? Does it
Yeah.
work? Great. Do I need it? Why?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like four-wheel drive in your car. Wait, what is it? You're telling me most cars in the world still aren't four-wheel drive? Like, wait, why do I need that? Hey, it's helpful when it snows. But so I think with what we track and what we focus on is mainly sleep. So we actually look at all the sleep stages, REM, light, deep. Things like sleep timing, what time you went to bed, how long it took you to fall asleep. A lot of people will lie in bed for 2 minutes to 2 hours before they fall asleep. And by the way, if you fall asleep in 2 minutes, that's actually a bad sign. That means you're like too tired, which most of us do fall asleep that fast. So it's actually supposed to take you closer to 15 minutes. But most of us are so sleep deprived. And we look at restlessness, like how much you toss and turn. But then some of the cardiac data and physiological data we track while you sleep is we look at heart rate every single beat. We look at heart rate variability, the variation of each one of those beats, all throughout the night. So we literally, for researchers, will send every single time-stamped heart rate beat interval. Fitbit doesn't do that. Garmin doesn't do that. Whoop doesn't do that. So I think that's part of the reasons why Apple definitely doesn't do that. That's part of the reasons why we've actually done all this research, and also from the sports teams and leagues that have looked into it have chosen us. Um, and we also track temperature. We have 3 temperature sensors, have had them in there since our first, Gen 1 Oura Ring. This is actually a Gen 2. Gen 1 is like really big and bulky, and no one knew about it like 5 years ago. But
It was just you holding people's fingers, giving them
yeah,
keys.
it was like
Gosh.
it was so big we couldn't fit multiple rings on one hand. It was just
Oh,
like
wow.
it was a monster.
So-
No, we also track respiratory rate. We track temperature. So we actually have 3 temperatures. We measure those every single second, and then we average each sensor to a 1-minute calculation. And then we track motion and steps, and we estimate METs, for activity. Now we're starting to use all that data to do pretty cool things in activity. We actually just released last week like an automatic
I
activity
saw.
detection. So if you're walking now versus running versus cycling versus hiking, even snowboarding. I had some user write us the other day saying like, "Hey, I went snowboarding for the first time, and my ring asked me if I just went snowboarding." So that was pretty cool. So starting to do a lot more in activity too. And we also do meditation. So you can take a meditation in the app. It's called Moment. If you hit the plus button, and you can actually see your heart rate variability, and actually increases in skin temperature, because there's some good science there about how that helps you, how that's a sign of getting into a deeper meditation. But those are some of the things we track.
I it's now hitting me that I've never used the meditation thing in Aura. Oops.
All good. It's like, it's one of those things that, like, as you start as a company, right, you want to have something you're really good at. And I think most of our users realize, hey, Aura's really, really good at sleep. And Max will get to the second question you didn't ask, but I posed, like, what do you do with this data? But we're starting to do a lot more, right? So we're starting to do more in activity, meditation. We know mental health, right, is obviously a big thing, and meditating helps. And by the way, meditation actually helps you sleep better too. So I think that's part of the reasons we're starting to push into that. Health is a holistic thing. Just sleeping well isn't going to be the answer to health, and neither is just working out hard, right? It's sleep, activity, diet, nutrition, mental health, overall movement. Best quote I ever remember about exercise. You know what the best exercise in the world is? It's the one you're not doing. Right. So your
Oh,
body
right.
your body
Understand.
learns and adapts and needs new things, right? And so we work as a system, and oftentimes health's pitched to us by a product or a company that, like, one thing's the answer. This keto diet is going to save all your, man, it all works better together, right? Um,
Well, lately, what we've been hearing is it all works together, but the biggest one by far is sleep. Is that, do you agree, or have we been have we been
I, I think
bamboozled?
I think the answer is yes. Scientifically, if you look at the research, I'd agree. Um, and I think, though, it's the most underlooked, right? So part of it is like, when you go to work out, you get to think about what workout I want to do. Hey,
Yeah.
should I be doing, West Side Training 5x5, right? Like, should I, be doing a CrossFit workout? Should I be doing, long aerobic work, right? It's like an active decision. Diet, oh man, there's keto, there's, like, low inflammatory, right? There's, carb cycling, right? There's you just overall counting calories, right? So there's so many active food decisions that we make each day. And most people, and including even myself before Aura, just thought, like, sleep's just, I just sleep. Everyone just sleeps. What do you mean? There are no decisions to make about sleep. You just sleep.
I
Um,
would almost say it's worse than that. I think a lot of times, oh man, I only slept 4 hours last night. I'm such a hard worker, or
yeah,
like, I think it went too far the opposite way.
that was the culture that I went through. So, after college, I studied electrical engineering. I went to Michigan. Sorry for wearing the paraphernalia today.
That's
Uh,
cool.
yeah, but we got a good basketball team this year. Pretty proud of them. I think I studied double E, but I graduated during the financial boom, 2007. And so, I had a bunch of student debt, and my sister lived in New York City. I was like, I want to live in New York City. That's cool. There's no tech companies in New York City back then. So, it was like, all right, what do you do? Finance. So I was like, my friends were working at banks, and they were like, here, we'll give you some book, learn about investment banking, and did that, and was lucky enough to get a job at, after a couple interviews. And so I ended up sleeping 2-3 hours a night max. I gained 50 pounds my first year. I was 150 pounds going in, right? I'm not a 5'5" on a good day. And so, I literally gained a pound a week. I wasn't eating that much differently. I definitely wasn't exercising because I was so sleep deprived. But first time in my life, I just sort of started to realize, like, holy cow, like I'm doing nothing. I'm just actually eating less calories, and I'm just gaining a ton of weight. And I think, it was a badge of honor, right? Like people literally wanted me to work on their project, some like the partners at the firm and stuff, because they're like, oh, this kid he can actually just pull an all-nighter and be fine. And so it was like, yeah, this badge of honor, but it totally destroys your health. So I mean, if you think about it, I think they've shown if you sleep 4 hours versus 8 hours, your testosterone, for men will literally, decrease to like as if you were 10 to 15 years older, right? So it's like, I might be 21 when I graduated college, but if I get 4 hours of sleep, I'm probably having, the testosterone, like, that's like my dad, right? So
Yeah.
I love my dad, by the way, but he's a lot older than me. And and even things like, frankly, longer term risk like Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is probably going to be one of the biggest unfortunate health costs to our society as the way it's increasing at a younger and younger age. It's been shown that actually Alzheimer's specifically is linked to the amount of deep sleep you get. And there's a toxin, that's washed away in your deep sleep. Your brain actually, when you sleep, literally cleans itself. It's called the lymphatic system, just like the lymphatic system for your body. There's one for your brain. And so it all actually, all those toxins, all that inflammation we accumulate every day is washed out when we sleep. And so, I think whether it's, fitness, whether it's mental health, your mood, how stressed you feel, how anxious you are, right? Your cognition, literally your reaction time, will suffer if you're not sleeping 8 hours, 7 hours a day, and all of that, I think, yeah, Max, we take for granted.
So can you talk a little bit about those sleep stages, why we should care about them, maybe like the validating too with your device? We've had a skeptic on the show that was like, no, that just look at how much you're sleeping, and like all of this other stuff is really tough to even look at and shouldn't be in your brain space.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there are things called, I don't know, a condition called orthosomnia. So if you like obsess about your sleep too much, right, you can actually hurt it, which is almost about anything, right? You obsess about your fantasy, football team, you keep changing up the order, you'll probably hurt your performance too. I've done it. I think if you obsess about your stocks all the time, right, you'll make sometimes bad decisions. So
Or investing.
yeah, I think obsessing about anything too much can be unhealthy sometimes. But no, I think sleep staging has shown us, like, deep sleep, right, the averages, depending, it changes as you age. Actually, we found out, society has found out, scientific research has shown us, as you age, actually the amount of deep sleep and REM sleep, perhaps two of the more important stages versus light sleep, decrease. And part of that is like, hey, is it the chicken or the egg? Are we aging and our sleep quality is getting worse, or are we actually aging because our sleep quality is getting worse? So deep sleep is actually where most of your muscle repair happens. It is also where other things happen, like if you look at even collagen, all your skin, all your collagen is made in your sleep. There's been specific studies looking at sort of that inflammation marker. It's called beta amyloid, that plaque, related to Alzheimer's, right? That's washed away in your deep sleep. REM sleep is sort of where your memory, your cognition. There's even studies showing sort of the amount of REM sleep is correlated to actually weight gain and weight loss. So if you don't get enough, REM sleep, actually it's bad for your metabolic health. That's been shown as sleep as a whole, by the way. So it's like, the less your hormonals your hormones that control your hunger, ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin, how hungry you feel; leptin, how full you feel. Right, is directly associated with how much you sleep. And that ends up meaning, like, if you get poor sleep, your ghrelin shoots up, so you're hungry and you want to crave energy dense food, and then you actually don't feel as full, which is your leptin. So you end up eating a lot more because you didn't sleep much. So I think the different stages are mainly helpful. I think about them as mental health, weight loss, memory consolidation and learning, REM sleep, physical repair, my body, my muscles, my whole physical system more in my deep sleep. And so, I think roughly you want to target sort of 20 to 25% of REM sleep, of the amount of your time you're sleeping, and about 20% for your deep sleep. And so I think that's why it's important to actually track that stuff. Um, hopefully that's helpful, Ali. Ali, I might have gone into too much detail.
No, there's never too much detail for the fit heads. We love diving in.
Yeah, I love when people are like, "Sorry, that was a long-winded answer." We're like, "Yeah, it's a podcast, so you could just keep talking. We can we'll be
That's the
here."
point. Okay. So you're combining like a lot of things for your sleep score. Um, is there like one thing above others that we should be looking at? Like I'm kind of leading to HRV. Is this like the holy grail of recovery, or should we really be looking at body temperature, which is still something I have trouble like figuring out how to use that data,
Yeah.
or heart rate, just resting heart rate, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think frankly, everyone's body is different, right? And everyone reacts differently to different things. And so, I think part of human life is just like understanding your own physical body that we're inside of, right? That we're part of. And so I think, we feel like the more that people can understand, the more data they can see, the more they can find that works for them. I've had users that tell me, I swear by two metrics on your app, HRV and deep sleep. That's it. If those are good, I feel good. I do well. I think you've had Marco Altini on the show, right? I mean, Marco is one of the best people in the world regarding HRV, and he's, I think, specifically shown in his research, if you just use one metric and use HRV for training, that's pretty powerful to determine your physical load that you should be taking the next day, and how long it takes you to recover, and how to program your actual workouts, how hard you should be working out on every workout. So I think we try to present it in the three scores we have in the app, right? Like we try to take sort of that sleep score. That's one night view of how you slept, looking at those sleep stages, your time, how long it took you to fall asleep, how restless you were. We try to look at that 1 day activity score. Are you moving every hour? Are you moving enough? Sort of like how strenuous is your movement, your intensity. But we try to package it up, Ali, in this thing called a readiness score. And so our view of the readiness score is like more of like a rolling average that's personal to you. So the readiness score will actually learn like, hey, if you sleep only 6 hours every night or 5 hours every night, but then you get 4 hours one night or 7 hours one night, that's going to have a huge impact on how you feel. And so what we look in the readiness score is like not only your sleep score and your activity score from the prior day, but we actually also look at the prior 2 weeks of sleep and activity and that balance. But then also a couple of physiological things like heart rate variability, the timing of your resting heart rate, the absolute value of your resting heart rate, even your respiratory rate, and your temperature. So we feel like, for example, when you get sick, your HRV generally when you get sick, we've shown that with some research, and as have others related to COVID and the flu, your HRV will tank, but it turns out your body temperature will spike, and guess what? So your respiratory rate will generally move up. Sometimes it moves down a lot too, and you may actually sleep really poorly too. And so that information, we think can be really, really helpful. For example, if you eat a huge amount of fats before you go to bed, or just a really, really large meal, you may also see your HRV decline, but you may not see your temperature increase, your respiratory rate increase. But you see those things when you get sick. And so that's why we try to package the readiness score to account for a lot of different variables, and not just a single one.
Yeah, I've certainly
And
seen
I've heard
that big
some.
meal just like garbage sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's like, funny enough, like certain fats, like if I eat a lot of fats, because they take longer to digest,
Interesting.
my sleep just gets trashed. So it's almost like if I eat like a bunch of avocado or guacamole, like late in the night as a snack, it's like worse than drinking alcohol for me.
Whoa.
Yeah. I know
Shots
that's like
fired.
alcohol depends on the amount. I'm talking like one drink or something, but
Yeah.
but it's it's so good to know.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, I know that it's sort of well, can my ring predict when I'm going to get sick?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, we've had that. We've been hearing that from our users for literally for 5 years. So every flu season, we've had users reach out to us and say, "Man, my readiness score like took a huge hit, and I thought it was completely wrong." And then like a day or two later, I was sick as hell.
Hmm.
And so I think the answer is, we've seen it in our users a ton of time. And then this year during COVID, or last year in 2020 during COVID, we actually were the first wearable to do a study on it. So we worked with UCSF. We actually donated 3,000 rings to frontline healthcare workers across the country because unfortunately they're going to be exposed right to this virus in the COVID wards. And then we also opened it up to all of our users. So over 70,000 of our users enrolled. And that research was actually published in December in a medical journal by UCSF and UCSD. And what they showed was that actually they took 50 subjects within that group that had positive COVID tests, and there's been more now. So looking for another follow up to that first paper. But what they showed is actually for 38 of the 50 subjects, we saw significant changes in the data up to 3 days before they felt symptoms for 38 out of 50. And mainly they found looking at that minute by minute temperature data was so indicative of like before you got a full on fever. Almost like you get these micro fevers, like, your regular thermometer is not going to pick it up because you only put it on once, try it once a day. But since we're monitoring that so frequently, they're able to pick up that combined with changes in heart rate variability, and respiratory rate. We're able to show with 38 out of the 50 subjects, we could see it 3 days in advance. And I think it was almost like 45 out of the 50, we saw it at least more than one day in advance. And, so I think that was like super fascinating. I think that's like one of the better, wearable out of every wearable now has done a study on COVID. But I think, that's frankly what we've been told by many, including some of the other funders for the study, which were medical grants, that this is some of the best data we've seen. And we were actually specifically told that there was another study that was using both Garmin's and Oura rings with soldiers. That was actually, the research was being done at Texas A&M, and it was partly sponsored by Defense Innovation Unit and by Philips, the publicly traded company, Philips medical company. And like they were saying the data off Oura ring was so much more predictive than the data off Garmin for determining the outbreak that they saw. And so we've heard that, we did 3 studies with different research partners last year on COVID, and all of them told us like this was the best data they've ever seen.
That would be very convenient if you could.
Well, I mean, it's not just this flu, right? I think part of it is scary is like we're going to have so many variants of this thing. We already are. The vaccines obviously are helping a ton, but like I got whatever. What's the swine flu? Was that an H1N1 variant?
N1,
Swine
yeah.
flu.
Yeah.
So I was at a Michigan football game, and 10 years ago or something, 2009, and tailgating with my friends, and swine flu was like breaking out on college campuses, and so it was like a outbreak. The movie was crazy. We were all like together at a tailgate, and we all ended up getting sick, within 48 hours. But a couple years later, on a New Year's when I was out again, and people are of course sick, and out on New Year's when I shouldn't be, and unfortunately, got sick again, and I got a test on it. It was like, oh, it's another variant of an H1N1. And so I think with COVID, we're going to see these variants for quite some time, and hopefully they won't be as bad. But every flu season, 50,000 people roughly die in the U.S. every flu season, and so it's like it doesn't have to be that way, right? Like, what if we knew, before we were full on sick and spreading this thing around, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you would think that like you don't want to spread it to anyone you know or love or care about. Even people you don't love, you probably don't want to spread it to them. But so I think I think more of this technology is showing how wearables can be used in the future. It's like a warning light. It's like check engine light on your car before it breaks down.
Yeah, it's really. If you could figure out a way, if like you could tell if I was gonna like fall and break my leg, that would be really nice. If you can get to work on that.
Have you broken your leg before? It sounds like.
I've only broken one bone in my body, and it was my middle finger. And so
Okay.
I got to walk around with a middle finger cast, which I thought was hilarious for about a week. And then I had the cast on for months or whatever. And I was like, this was funny, but now it really does.
Now it sucks. Yeah.
It sucks.
I'm not gonna ask how you did that, but part of me is curious.
Yeah, it was basketball. It wasn't
Okay.
nothing crazy.
Well, I saw
Right.
something else about Aura predicting depression and anxiety. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing work on depression, anxiety. I actually think y- there's other work we've done on frankly even pregnancy and female health and women's health. Um, the depression, anxiety ones, man, I can't even keep up. We're doing so many studies. So I'm trying to remember. Do you remember which university that was with?
Oh, geez,
Um,
no, sorry.
I know the one I do recall. I know there's been a few now that are ongoing. I think one of them showed precisely actually both with sleep, and whether it's sleep staging, but frankly even just general things within sleep, like how long it takes us to fall asleep, how anxious we are, how much we may sleep. That combined with heart rate variability, has been actually pretty correlated to depression and anxiety. There's actually even another good study going on at UCLA right now with Apple Watch, I think, and they've been finding the same thing. That even just time in bed, because that's what Apple does, and heart rate variability, they do a little bit of heart rate variability, random measurements throughout the day. That's been indicative of the onset of depression and anxiety. We've done studies with, frankly, even those with drug abuse and relapse and addiction. And I think some of that early data sort of suggests the same, that you can actually see when someone's cravings are getting really really bad. I mean, talk about another national health epidemic, right? It's super unfortunate. Any of us that have seen friends or family that's fallen to that. But I mean, how cool would it be to know that, like, hey, someone you really care about that's trying to get through this, all of a sudden, is getting a really bad craving, right? And to be there emotionally for them, for their therapist to be there, right? I think that's how all these things are going to be used to change the way the healthcare system works.
Yeah, when you say all these things, like it makes me wonder about partnering with other wearables. Like you were talking about the hunger problem with when you don't sleep enough.
Yeah,
And and I had mentioned when I eat a big meal, I get crap sleep and I also see my glucose goes nuts. So
yeah,
like connecting the dots there would be fantastic.
100%. There's someone in the UK that's actually I want to say it's Alessandro Ferretti. Um, there's some great research, and also he put out like YouTube videos showing like heart rate variability after a meal can be pretty darn correlated with glucose response after a meal. Um,
Whoa.
yeah, it's been a while since I've looked at that. But I believe there's a pretty strong correlation. So I think, yeah, the future, is again more data. Like you were asking about, hey, should we just use HRV? Should we just use deep sleep? If you talk to any data scientist on our team, one thing that they always want more of is more data.
Data. Yeah.
Right? So it's like, we want to see it all, right?
More hot dogs. I mean, yeah, more data.
Yeah, more data, more cowbell, more data. And I think all of these things can be helpful, triangulated, and help us find more signal from noise. So yeah, I think integrating with more wearables, integrating through even other types of data, how is your anxiety and your sleep related to your calendar? I can tell you mine's directly correlated. 5,
Yeah.
10 meetings back to back to back on Zoom, right? You can bet like I'm more stressed that day. As a result, I sleep worse that day.
Mhm.
So eventually I think the more data streams, companies will share with each other, integrate with each other, I think can be helpful for helping, humans, us as a society, manage like our lifestyle choices and ultimately our health. So I think, yeah, working with glucometers, and CGMs, yeah, we would love to partner with all of them. We have an open API. We also, anyone can actually check it out. It's pretty darn detailed. We also have, we both pull and push data to Google Fit and Apple Health Kit. And so I think, we've been
Which
out
one's
there.
better?
I don't know. You'd probably have to ask our team. From what I understand, actually, like Apple Health Kit was first, way more robust, but Google Fit, has definitely been improving that product. Um, I'm not sure like which one takes more different types of fields and data and stuff now, but um, yeah, but
Max
I've
trying to
heard
be
they're both great.
controversial.
No, I mean we work with both of them. Actually, that automatic activity detection. Here's a great example of how I think the future will work. Right, that automatic activity detection, right? Like what we did is we had a subset of our users who actually use Google Fit and also a subset who use Apple Health Kit. right? And some of those users happen to use Strava, Nike Training Club, some snowboarding app that my friend was telling me about the other day. And so what happens is we actually, because people share that data, we pull that data in, and we took that data in and we looked at against our our data on our device when you were doing that activity, and we created an algorithm based on all that sort of aggregated data. And so now for people who don't use HealthKit or Google Fit, like when you go snowboarding with your Oura Ring, it'll say, hey, were you just snowboarding? And so I think it's, we learned from a certain portion that we were able to ingest data from, and then we were able to use that with the rest of the audience. And I think that actually is like the platform that is going to be the future of health, right? It's like, let us help each other. The way Max may react to a certain heavy intense workout might be pretty correlated to me, right? Maybe let's say we have similar profiles, both epic beards. His is a little bit more epic. And Allie, I think the way you react to workout may be completely differently to me, but there's others that you can learn from in our database that probably look more like you. I think that, and that's sort of actually funny enough, like think how we act as humans. It's like, oh, that worked for you. Man, like when I started to learn how to lift, like I went to the most jack guy in our hall freshman year of college, that could throw out the most weight. And I was like, man, like, Jeff, I know we only talked once or twice, but I don't know how to lift weights, man. I'm going to hang around you and follow you to the gym, whether you like it or not. So like, we better become friends, because I'm going to annoy the hell out of you if we ain't. And, Jeff taught me how to lift. Right. And, I gained a ton of weight, gained a ton of muscle, like, went from like literally like, I think I could bench press 95 pounds to like, 185 pounds by the end of that year, for a decent amount of reps. And so like, I think that's, as humans, we find people that sort of have gone through an evolution, learn, and we want to learn from. If we can do that on a grander scale through Oura, through, I think that would be so darn cool.
Well, speaking of weights, I'm waiting for my ring to be like, oh, that was a nice 5x5 bench press, and your bar speed was X or whatever.
Pretty cool. I would like to do that too. Trust me.
Right? That was me just like, planting the seed so you can go work on the thing that I want.
Point taken and observed, and I'll pass this on to our team, and they'll probably be like, yes, you've told us this 50 times. That takes a lot of work to do. Right. But I'll mention it 51 times. No, I think that could be pretty cool too, right? Like I think with strength training, understanding bar speed, bar mechanics, right? Relative to your recovery, we're going to get a better picture of you and, help you understand yourself.
Yeah, a few times you mentioned, like, back when you first started, that no one was doing this, and that you're kind of first to market on a lot of stuff. Have you seen since then, like, a cultural shift? I can't tell if I'm just in, like, an echo chamber, and now I know that all the people I'm around care about recovery, and the rest of the world is actually, like, still just proud that they're, like, I'll sleep when I'm dead kind of thing. Or is the world really changing and we're starting to care?
I think the world's really changing, but like most things, it has to get really bad before we care. And so I think, like take the climate, for example, like, hey, the world's changing, like this planet's getting messed up, or winters are harsher, or summers are harsher, whatever it is, right? Snow in Texas. But I think just unfortunately, like, we now sleep less than 50% of America will sleep less than 6 hours on any given night now, right? And like 50 years ago, that used to be 7 hours. 100 years ago, it used to be 8 hours, right? And so it's like, and that has a huge impact on all the things we talked about with health. And I think the more and more that happens, the more and more you sort of pull, then people are going to revert and be like, whoa, why am I sleeping so bad? Oh man, didn't realize, we'll do more and more research, because more and more unfortunate health problems will happen. So I think that's what's happening. The cool thing you can do and check out is if you go on Google Trends. I did this a while ago. I don't know. So it's been a while since I've looked at it, but look at sort of just sleep versus running, and Google Trends plot it in the US over like the last 10 years, just how many people search sleep versus running. More people search for sleep now on a daily basis in Google than running. So, I mean, like, I think
was no longer trendy.
Yeah, it may have changed during COVID. I don't know if like things in COVID changed that, because like, but I think that's an example too. And I think it's sleep science is new, right? Sleep science, like sleep labs, didn't really start coming on the scenes till like the late 80s and 90s, and so like sleep research research, reading your brain waves came about sort of after reading your heart rate, and even things like glucose. So I think it's a newer science. We're learning more, and we're starting to realize how important it is. But unfortunately, it's taken a lot of us that get really poor sleep for people to realize like how big of a role it has.
Google Trends is a fun one is a fun rabbit hole to poke around.
Yeah.
I know that on a personal level, this last year has been weird. I made a video a couple years ago, and it was my most viewed video this past year. Was how to shotgun a beer. Have you what sort of can you talk to me about what Aura has seen, or what is how predictable, or
Yeah.
how is it alcohol if influenced or affected? What have you seen about the effects of alcohol?
Oh yeah, no, we were so alcohol is one of the biggest impacts to your sleep and recovery.
Oh, it's not just me.
No, it's not just you. We're not alone. I thought it was just
Oh.
us. No, but it's actually not everyone. So timing of alcohol matters quite a bit. So whether you have like tequila at like 2 a.m., you probably shouldn't be up at 2 a.m. anyway, but having tequila at 2 a.m.,
Which is
versus
better than
having like
guacamole if you're at a
better than
Mexican restaurant.
guacamole. For me, it may be different for you. But maybe it's the wrong kind of guacamole and maybe the right kind of tequila. I don't know. No, I think timing matters a lot. So what we found with users is actually having a night, like sort of a happy hour drink, 4 or 5 p.m. Doesn't impact your sleep nearly as much as having something later in the night, like a nightcap. So that has a huge impact. And then different people react differently to, let's say a beer versus wine versus versus hard liquor, or even the type of hard liquor. I think with most of our users, we found deep sleep to be more affected than REM sleep, which is interesting. But heart rate variability, respiratory rate, definitely lots and lots of movement there. That was by far, I think, the big thing, the cardiometabolic health, which we already sort of know about alcohol too.
You're the third person we've had on that's like a low-key proponent of day drinking. Just like sober up before you go to sleep, but you got to start early.
Yeah. No, I think we even food, right? Just the timing of food, same thing. I think there's been pretty good studies showing that, like, I believe Sachin Panda at the Salk Institute showed this in some of their studies, that like actually your liver will release like a lot less like insulin right after the sun goes down in response to a food. So then like your glucose post-meal glucose levels, like if you have the same food at like 8 p.m. versus like 4 p.m., could be a totally different response, which is, I think, just fascinating, right? Yeah.
I've also heard the opposite, that some people are better at eating carbs later in the evening.
Carbs, I actually think it's because it's a faster adapting, 4 calories, right, per gram of carbs, right, versus fat, right? Like you can actually see a better response to carbs, a little bit of carbs right before you go to bed, just not too much. I'm sure like glycemic load still probably holds true and matters there. But I've even found that, like, if I have just a little bit of something before I go to bed, I might sleep a little bit better. But if I have too much of the wrong thing, I sleep a lot worse.
This bugs me because everyone says rest and digest, and so why can't I just eat everything and go to sleep? They're not the rest and digest. It's the same parasympathetic.
It's in the title.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
I don't know. I mean, actually, I think you ever hear that Chinese adage, like, if you take 1,000 steps after every meal, you'll live to be 100.
Yeah.
So like, I think I found actually, if you like, I've used a CGM for a little bit, sort of off label, like many of us have done
Ooh.
before, like, right, now there's cooler companies making it more accessible, Levels, Sapiens. I know there's a January, right? There's a bunch of these companies now doing it and consumerizing, which I think is so helpful. But like, I found actually, if I just take, literally 500 to 1,000 steps, right, like after a meal, like I can eat worse and still manage my glucose levels better. I'm sure there's other negative impacts, right? Still, like, I'm not saying you should eat a ton of crap and just walk and it'll be fine. No, but like, I found that and particularly for me, definitely helps with my glucose response.
Yeah, I love that you add the caveat so often, like, oh, well, for me specifically,
Yeah.
which is so counter to like health culture before this, where it was like, here's the universal thing that you need to do that
Yeah.
works for everyone.
No, I think that's one thing we've realized, whether it's through personal experience. I mean, that's fascinating. That's like that was my story. So like I grew up in, Allentown, Pennsylvania, and sort of, for a little bit in suburban New Jersey, right? So like for me, like, I looked different. My parents were from India. I'm Sikh, so I wear a turban, like stuck out a little bit in middle school and high school. And so my way to fit in was sports, right? And for me, it was soccer. Again, 5'5", so basketball, a little hard. But I sucked. I sucked so bad. I was terrible. And I felt like I had to work twice as hard to be half as good. And like, I had friends on the team who literally could, smoke a pack of cigs, eat a bunch of Sour Patch Kids, and run like a 5:30-minute mile and have like 6-pack abs. And I'm like, dude, I look at the Sour Patch Kids in the vending machine and I get fat. Like, what the hell? It's super frustrating. But I think, it's that self-exploration, me accepting that and learning that there's going to be people who are 0.1% of the population. And by the way, what works for them probably ain't going to work for the average person, right? And the answer is like we're all average or above average in different ways, right? And we just got to find out those ways for us. And I think that's what's so fascinating about health, our lives, right? Um, and everyone's got to take their own approach and find what works for them. And then it changes. By the way, like what worked for me when I was 25, doing keto diets, lifting a ton, now running a startup, older than 35, it's not the same. Like that same diet, that same stress, like, I'm already getting it in multiple different ways, through my work. So for me, more stress may not, physical stress may not always be the best thing. So I think it's like, we change, we age, right? Our bodies react differently. Things that worked when I was 21, 22 don't work, as I get closer to 40. So I think it's important to recognize that it's what works for me. Can't say it's going to work for someone else, but hey, here's Aura. Maybe you can find what works for you.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing too, that it's fine. You might find what works for you now, but like that will shift. And it's just like a continuing, you know, changing for yourself versus like figuring out your answer and sticking to it. I guess that all goes along with like continued data.
Yeah,
What's
it's something I wish I like knew earlier as I age. I'm like, but I found it with other friends. I found so many other friends that did keto, you know, 13, 14, 15 years ago. And now they're much different. Their lifestyles are much different. And that same diet sometimes, isn't always the right answer at that point in time.
and also I think a lot of people are looking for I don't want to understand it, just tell me what to do so I can do it. How much of your day, I guess, or how much of the aura, how much of your brain space is taken up by like explaining what matter and why what stuff matters and how that can help.
I mean, I think if it was just my day, I wouldn't get that far. So I think it's like, hiring the right people on the team that can help us spread that message to so many more. Um, so, earlier on, yeah, it felt like a nonstop, record player. But I think luckily now, we've got to, frankly, I think the way for this to succeed is actually get others to realize that our users tell each other, right? That's the beauty now. Like there's like Reddit subthreads and like Facebook subthreads in like different countries on even on different topics regarding Aura. It's so cool. And luckily I think people are sharing there, frankly. Hey, this is what worked for me. Here's what I found. Here's what I could like actually figure out with this data. And here's how I was able to make a change in my life because I found that out. And now I'm doing X, Y, and Z. So luckily, Max, you know, I think it's starting to just get out there. We almost can't control it anymore.
Building a tribe. Very cool. Well, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Yeah,
Very
thank you, Ali,
insightful.
Max. It's honestly, thank you. I'd like to say thank you for actually doing what you do, getting this information out there to people. That's actually what helps. And I started a lot of my health journey personally, just listening to podcasts and reading books, right? So I think it's like this is the stuff that actually helps users tell that message, like you were just talking about, Max, that helps everyone learn. And I think we're all in it together. We're all trying to figure out what works for us, and hopefully we can just take a little bit of what's worked for someone else and apply it to ourselves and see if it does.
Yeah. Test, get some data, revise. Love it. All
Share
right,
the
cool.
answers.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm cheating off Max.
How did you grow that epic beard? I really want to know. We can talk about that after the podcast.
I got some creams. I'll send you something.
It's a cream. Wait, send it to me. I want one too. Grow one just like you
Cool.
guys.
Thanks a ton. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
both of you.
thank you. And thank you to the Fit Heads. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. That helps us out a whole lot.